Good evening and welcome to the Genesis Science Report. I'm David Rives, and coming up on tonight's show, we'll examine a viral photo from Mars nicknamed Skull Hill. Is it evidence of life, or is it just an unusual rock formation shaped by wind? Planetary geologist Dr. Kirby Runyon joins us to break down what this image really shows. Later, we'll turn to the fossil record and revisit the Cambrian explosion, the sudden appearance of complex life that continues to puzzle evolutionists. Paul Garner helps us unpack why this event fits far better with the biblical account of Earth's history. But first, in Genesis 11, mankind came together with one voice, one tongue. They said basically this. They said, "Come, let us build us a tower that may reach unto heaven." So this was the Tower of Babel. It was man's attempt to reach godlike heights, but without God. In fact, it was probably more related to astrology than anything else. Not to reach the stars themselves, but to reach unto the stars, to communicate with the heavens. But what did the Lord say in response? He said, well, this is not what I told you to do. I'm going to scatter you from across the face of the earth. So he scattered them. He confused their language, because when man in his arrogance builds without the Lord, well, that's when judgment usually follows. Now, fast forward to today. We've built a new tower, not of bricks and clay, but of data, circuits, of code. Not one that stretches into the sky, but one that stretches across the globe, connecting every device, every screen, every thought. We call it artificial intelligence, and it speaks one language. Now, that's not a coincidence. These machines are large language models. They're designed to unify human speech, human knowledge into a single, seamless system. They translate all tongues. They speak to everyone. They supposedly understand everything. And once again, nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? Well, my main job isn't to say that AI can't be good in any way. As a tool, it can be helpful, but I warn that it will not be a kind master. Listen to this from Yoshua Bengio, one of the fathers of artificial intelligence tech.
My colleagues and I earned top prizes in our field. People call me a godfather of AI. I'm not sure how I feel about that name, but I do feel a responsibility to talk to you about the potentially catastrophic risks of AI.
Potentially catastrophic. The founders of AI tech are sounding the alarm. No safeguards are in place. We are truly in uncharted waters at this point. We're not just teaching machines to speak, we're teaching them to reason, to decide, to replace. And instead of seeking God's wisdom, mankind is seeking to play God again. We're standing at the foot of a new Babel, and more than just the first bricks have already been laid. Only this new tower, well, it actually thinks. It generates its own truths. It speaks with the authority of 1,000 scholars, and yet it has no concept of the fear of the Lord, which is the beginning of wisdom. The same God who confused the tongues of Babel is watching, and no code, no server, no machine will stand in the day of the Lord. So don't lay up your treasures here on earth, because it will all be dust one day. But God's everlasting word, that's what will endure. So next time you ask ChatGPT or Grok a question, think about the source, an all-knowing database designed by sinful, fallible man. And remind yourself that the wisdom of this world, it's foolishness to our God. I'm David Rives, and this is the Genesis Science Report. Today we can just pick up our cell phone and call somebody across the world. Long before this, there were long-distance communications that have happened throughout history.
And you could see dozens of ships coming in that don't belong there. Light up that fire so that that can be seen miles away. If you're going to be defending against attackers, it's got to be able to pass the warning in a short amount of time.
On wonders without number. Friends of Genesis Science Network, we started this channel to make an impact in the lives of both Christians and inquiring skeptics around the world. It has done that in unbelievable ways. Now, one of our viewers wrote, "I've been watching your channel for nearly a week now, and I would like you to know the blessing that it's been to me. I've never had the finances or the opportunity to attend a university, but I've been a believer for the last 37 years. Your channel has done more for my understanding of my faith than any book I've read save the Bible, and I feel like I'm finally able to attend the lecture classes I've always wanted to. Thank you so much for your ministry." I want to thank you for your generous support. GSN is no simple project and requires monthly commitments to keep it on the air. Please consider becoming a partner with us today. Just call 931-212-7990 or click Give on our website. We are making a difference. I'm David Rives, and you're watching the Genesis Science Network. Welcome back to the report. It is time to tackle a viewer question in our Genesis Science Q&A. Now, this week's submission comes from Lamar on YouTube, who asks, "When did time actually begin? It seems like time is really just a human construct in our daily lives. Without us, does it have any meaning?" Great question, Lamar. Okay, so time would begin, according to a Christian point of view, according to a biblical point of view, in the beginning. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, Genesis 1:1. Well, what is the beginning? The beginning would have to be the beginning of time itself. So time started right away. Some people say, well, wait a second, but wasn't the sun only created on the fourth day? Well, the sun is what gives us our days. So we have no concept of time until the sun is there. This is true, but God does. We weren't around until the sixth day, so God did not need the sun to start a measure of time. God started the concept of time that we use in the beginning. That's what the Bible tells us. So that makes perfect sense. Your question about, is it really a human construct in our daily lives? Well, how could it be a human construct? It had to have been some element of the universe, and we've discussed this on previous Genesis Science reports, so go check those out on YouTube. But basically, we actually have to have a concept of time, but the concept of time has to come from either a dimensional state or something that pre-exists, and therefore, it means that it has a creator. You said, without us, does time have any meaning? To which I say, absolutely. Our Creator, Yahweh, the God of the Bible, who formed the universe, He is outside of time. He doesn't need time to exist. However, when He created time, He created it for us. So without us, it still has meaning, and yet it's created for us. Thanks, Lamar, for that question, and we love connecting with our viewers. So remember to keep those questions coming in. You can share them with us on social media, or you can email comments at GenesisScienceNetwork.com. Now, one of the most common questions that I get when I go out and speak at churches, at universities, at colleges, people ask about biblical creation and say, well, if the universe is only thousands of years old, how can we see light from stars that are millions of light years away? We've tackled that question many times, but Dr. Russell Humphreys tackles the issue in his book titled Starlight and Time. He's a respected physicist, a researcher. Dr. Humphreys presents a compelling cosmological model that harmonizes Scripture with what we observe in the heavens. And it's not the only model that's out there. There are many models that can tackle this question sufficiently. But rather than dismissing the question or relying on speculation, Starlight and Time walks readers through the physics of time dilation, gravitational effects, and biblical clues, actually from an Einsteinian relativity perspective that points towards a young universe and not long ages of time. It's written for believers who want real answers and for skeptics who think that the Starlight and Time problem disproves Genesis. Well, believe it or not, secular astronomy has its own Starlight and Time problem. You can find your copy of Starlight and Time by visiting the Creation Superstore online at creationsuperstore.com. And now it's time for the Kids Corner. So, what is a Velociraptor? Well, if you've seen one of the many dinosaur movies that have come out in theaters, you've probably had a pretty good idea of what the Hollywood version of a Velociraptor looks like. So these movies, while they're pretty exciting, they aren't super scientifically accurate. One movie series, yeah, you know the one I'm talking about, features a dinosaur called a Velociraptor, and it's about 11 feet long, weighs maybe 220 pounds. Its skull is lined with sharp teeth, and its hind feet have a toe that features a long, dangerous, sickle-shaped claw. Well, that's actually a fairly accurate description of another dinosaur entirely called Deinonychus, which is a whole lot larger than Velociraptor. We've got a full-size model of one of those at the Wonder Center. But many visitors who come through are surprised to learn that Velociraptor was actually a little dinosaur, standing only about 18 inches tall and weighing about 30 or 40 pounds. So a Velociraptor actually looks like the Deinonychus, but in a much, much, much smaller body. So this would be more like a full-sized Velociraptor. They grew a little bit larger than this in some fossils that we find. Both Velociraptor and Deinonychus, they're members of a grouping of dinosaurs called dromaeosaurids, which means running lizards. They're often referred to as raptors. Now, those are not slow plodding creatures, but they're faster running dinosaurs. They were probably able to pursue slower prey and overtake them with these sharp teeth right here and their sharp claws. Now, the skull model that I'm holding here is about 9.5 inches long, and it's about the actual size of the fossil Velociraptors that have been found. The skull of the Deinonychus is a whole lot larger. It measures 15 to 17 inches long. Other raptors are even larger, like the Utah raptor. Their bodies could have been up to 20 feet long based on the actual fossils we find. So when it comes to science and real paleontology, we can learn a whole lot more than movies. Now, newer movies, books, and museum displays, they often picture these kind of things as being covered with feathers. And that's largely the result of an effort to show that raptors, well, they never really went extinct. They slowly evolved into birds despite a lack of evidence that big theropods had anything of the sort. Now, some scientists even go so far as to classify raptor dinosaurs as birds. It's a shame that this is being taught as fact. What's been presented as evidence of feathers, it's actually really marginal at best. It looks like bumps or wisps, but not real preserved feathers like we would think of them. Sometimes even bumps on the skin are called quill knobs where feathers would have been attached to, but don't be so quick to believe all of the hype. There's even a possibility that what is seen as short fuzz, it might actually be the result of the decay of their skin connective tissues. So we can be confident that the majestic eagle and the fierce Velociraptor, they're two different creations by God in the beginning, and that He created the birds of the air completely separate from all of the land animals, just as He told us in the first chapter of the book of Genesis. Still, dinosaurs are cool, and the tiny Velociraptor all the way up to Deinonychus are sure fun to study. Come see this model as well as many other full-size models at the Wonder Center and Science Museum in Tennessee. Now, a photo from Mars is sparking wild theories. A rock that looks eerily like a human skull. Is it evidence of life, or is it just geology playing tricks on us? Dr. Kirby Runyon joins us to break it down right after the break. Do you pray for your family to know Christ? Do you pray for your country?
In the 900s, some very amazing things were happening in Russia. She was a very cruel, action-oriented woman. Her name was Olga. She took a visit to Constantinople. To make a long story short, she became a Christian, a real Christian. She came back completely different person.
On Wonders Without Number. We know that you want to have a deep faith in the Lord and to witness to those around you. To do that, you need tools and information to strengthen your faith using scientific discoveries that prove the Bible to be true. The problem is that atheists using evolutionary theories claim that they've refuted the Bible's accuracy. What's worse, the real facts are censored. If you don't have a PhD in science, you're often left feeling helpless when trying to defend your faith. But you need to be equipped to know the truth. For that reason, over the past 13 years, we've become the most trusted name in biblical scientific research, interfacing with nearly every top Christian organization in existence to distill and give you the true facts as they support your faith in Christ. Sign up for our weekly emails and free bi-monthly magazine. Consider becoming a partner with us as we reach the world with the truth of the Bible and the gospel message. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. Is there such a thing as a sure proof that God is real, that creation is true, and that we can believe the Bible?
We have a fixed amount of energy and matter in this universe. But if the universe had a beginning, naturally, everything had to have come from nothing.
Wow.
Which is the most immense violation of the first law that you could imagine.
On Wonders Without Number. And welcome back to the report. NASA's rovers have sent back thousands of incredible images from Mars. But every so often, one photo sparks the headlines and wild theories as well. The latest is a rock formation that looks strangely like a human skull. It's nicknamed Skull Hill. Is this evidence of life on Mars, or is it just a trick of geology and imagination? Well, joining us is planetary geologist Dr. Kirby Runyon to help us separate fact from fiction. Dr. Runyon is a NASA-funded planetary geologist with the Planetary Science Institute and a lifelong Christian who enjoys exploring the harmony between faith and science. He also leads educational space tours to Mars-like terrains in New Mexico and, this sounds really cool, zero-gravity flights. I love it. Dr. Runyon, welcome to the report.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be with you. Great to be here.
Great to have you. Let's start with this Mars image. Why is this Skull Hill creating such a stir online?
Well, you know, I'm not sure why it's making such a stir. It's an interesting looking rock, that's for sure. To be honest, I didn't see a skull in it when I looked at it. Kind of the only unusual thing about it is the fact that it's not dust covered. So I don't know if you have the image available, but it's a gray rock that's sitting in a very red, dusty area on the plains at Jezero Crater, Mars, which is the exploration zone of NASA's Mars 2020 Perseverance rover. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, and that's yeah. I don't know if there's a lot of resemblance there. But again, some things take the internet by storm, like the color of clothes or the patterns on or what do you hear? I don't know. It's something that people stay up at night thinking about.
Right. So David, when I see that, I see something that looks a lot like this. This is a rock that I have that I picked up in northwest Argentina in the Andes Mountains. And you'll notice some things about this that it has in common with the skull-looking rock. Yep. It's got all these facets on it and these sharp edges and these little pitted areas. Well, this is a type of, it's a volcanic rock to begin with. It's made out of a very common rock called basalt. In fact, this is a type of basalt called andesitic basalt. Andesitic comes from the Andes Mountains of South America. And basalt is the most common volcanic rock in the solar system, really. And so the skull rock on Mars is also a piece of basalt. Mars is a basalt planet. But what makes this rock and the rock that I'm holding special is that it's been sandblasted by the wind. Oh. That's a process that makes a type of rock we call a ventifact, V-E-N-T-I-F-A-C-T. And both the rock that I'm holding that I picked up in the field in Argentina that's been sandblasted by the wind and the skull rock on Mars have both been sandblasted. Now, the time span for both is probably very different. We don't know for sure. But Earth is much windier with a lot more with sand availability than necessarily any place on Mars. But almost certainly, when I saw that rock on Mars, I knew exactly what it was. It is a sand-blasted piece of volcanic basalt.
And that makes a lot of sense. But could the rock's position or maybe its shape tell us anything about Mars' wind patterns, or even maybe what the surface looked like in the past?
Yeah, that's a great question. It can tell you the orientation of the wind. You'll notice that this rock is streamlined. In fact, this is very similar to how the tails of airplanes are shaped. Wind naturally wants to flow wants to form streamlined features if it can't abrade it at all. And so this rock tells us that the wind was blowing largely as I'm pointing this way. And maybe there were some seasonal changes to wind direction, but if we had good 3D scans of that rock on Mars, it could tell us the direction of the wind, maybe not now, but in the past. We would call that a paleo wind indicator, paleo referring to the past, of course. It can also tell us how strong the wind has been if you assume a certain amount of sand. So the wind has to be blowing a certain strength to be able to pick up sand grains, to move them along fast enough to be able to abrade that rock slowly over the eons.
That's pretty interesting. Now, you study planets, you are an expert in this field. Would you say that what we know about different extrasolar planets, something outside of our solar system, that we see anything unusual within our own solar system, or do you think that it's just a combination, just a great variety of different environments?
Yeah, there's a fun saying in Star Trek: infinite variety and infinite combinations. And it speaks to God's creativity, I think. Yeah. The same physics happens across the solar system and across different extrasolar planets, but the gravity on Mars is different and the atmospheric density is different on Mars. And so we've got the same types of forces, but in different proportions to each other. And that can lead to wildly different looking alien landscapes and beautiful landscapes. And, we don't know what extrasolar planets look like up close. We know that they exist. We know how massive they are. We know broadly their bulk composition, but we don't have the kind of detail for extrasolar planets the way we have for planets, moons, and asteroids in our own solar system, where we've been sending robotic spacecraft and once in a while astronauts since really the 1950s. And so we have up-close views of a lot of places in our own solar system that we may never have for extrasolar planets.
Yeah. Yeah, but again, I do love the point that you made, because there is so much diversity within everything we see within our own solar system, within every star, which almost has its own fingerprint or light spectrum that can tell us something about it, and it does show such incredible design. Why do you think that people are so quick to interpret things like Skull Hill or these rocks on Mars as potential signs of intelligent life?
Yeah, I think people like to see what they want to see. Yeah. And I think a lot of people want there to be life, indigenous life beyond Earth. I don't know. Yeah. God can make life wherever he wants. There could be life on Mars. I don't know. I don't try to make up my mind one way or another. I'm a scientist in that regard. Show me the data. My faith will be just fine, regardless of if there is life beyond Earth or if there isn't life beyond Earth. But I think there's a bias. People want there to be life beyond Earth. And so people, it's like perhaps maybe seeing shapes in the clouds and fantasizing about what those shapes could be, or maybe looking up and inventing new constellations just by looking at the arrangement of the stars in the sky. I'm curious if there's a similar predilection for people in looking at strange looking rocks on another planet.
And Dr. Runyon, I've always associated that with almost a Christian origins perspective, which says that we're made in God's image, and therefore we also are creative, just as he creates, and we love coming up with these creative concepts. And even when it happens to be sci-fi and it makes a good movie and it might not be true, it is still something that is incredibly interesting to think about. Dr. Runyon, thank you so much for giving us a clear perspective on, hey, what's really happening on Mars, and offering some Earth-based evidence, even with rocks that you've picked up, to guide us along in this. So thanks again for that.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And if you are fascinated by today's conversation on planetary science, I'd encourage you to check out planex.space. It is an incredible resource created by Dr. Runyon and his team, packed with interactive tools, research, and insights into planetary exploration from a biblical perspective. Now, while space gets a lot of attention, some of the most astonishing discoveries, well, they're actually happening right under our feet. Scientists recently found fossilized nerve cords in actually Cambrian arthropods. These are delicate structures. These are things that are incredibly well preserved and theoretically shouldn't survive for hundreds of millions of years. So it raises big questions about fossilization and Earth's history. To help us make sense of what this means for the fossil record and for biblical history, we'll be joined by paleobiochemist Dr. Brian Thomas. Dr. Thomas has been researching into this discovery, and he will bring us insight in just a moment. We'll be right back after the break. Work of his hands. Let's look at photography of the Earth from space with a NASA astronaut.
We orbit the Earth 16 times a day. My cumulative time in space is 534 days, so I'll let you do the math.
Wow.
But
yeah.
What the message we hear, there's absolutely no conflict between science and scripture.
Absolutely. On Wonders Without Number.
Join us at the Wonder Center and Science Museum for this month's Unwrapped event, where we feature expert speakers presenting scientific and biblical discoveries.
It pays to learn history, folks.
We cannot create an aircraft even close to what these birds can do.
This changes the way we do biology.
Discounted tickets are available for an after-hours adventure, including museum admission with kids' hands-on activities, a planetarium movie, Tesla experience, and pre-show entertainment. Perfect for the whole family.
What you believe about the history of the world is going to affect the way that you study the world today.
You see a mathematical order here. You see the orthogonal lines. You see the repeating patterns.
You don't understand what it takes to make a cell. That's serious engineering.
Come be inspired as you learn. The evening presentation is free, but seating is extremely limited, so RSVP immediately at wondercenter.org.
Today on Wonders Without Number, I want to tell you there are some areas of history that we will go through where we will show you that the reason you are on Earth at this moment is absolutely no coincidence.
So if William the Conqueror had not fathered Henry Beauclerk after surviving the Battle of Hastings, there would have been no George Washington, and America as we know it would not have happened.
On Wonders Without Number. We are back, and it's time to hear from you, our viewers. Our first viewer voices submission tonight comes from Cindy S. She says, I love Genesis Science Network. It is what converted me from an old Earth to a young Earth creationist, and I will forever, forever be grateful. Cindy, thank you so much. Messages like this are so encouraging. Again, you can have a strong Christian who is studying these issues and looking at old Earth, young Earth, old universe, young universe, combinations. Is there any way to fit long ages into a biblical worldview? And all of those, and they can be legitimately searching. But it is our job to give you that evidence that Scripture indicates that we're talking about a relatively younger universe and Earth, and science is also indicating the exact same thing. Nearly every new discovery. So thank you for allowing us to use Genesis Science Network in your life to bring clarity to these types of issues, Cindy. Our second testimonial comes from Richard H., who had this to say after visiting the Wonder Center. He said, we've been looking forward to going and brought our 16-year-old son and a friend. The entire museum went above and beyond expectations. The planetarium was fun. And the exhibits were done so well. My wife could have stayed in the gift shop looking through books for hours. The staff was very friendly and helpful. There was so much wonderful information about creation, and it was presented really well. May God bless this endeavor. We can't wait to come back and watch this continue to grow. Thank you, Richard. A couple of points. Your 16-year-old son, I'm glad that y'all were able to enjoy that. Your wife, I know we do actually have, I think it's now well over 3,000 different books, videos, and other resources and gifts in the gift shop and bookstore. And then the rest of the museum, you mentioned the planetarium. That seems to get high marks across the board. So we are pleased to offer just a profound planetarium experience that inspires those who go through the Wonder Center and Science Museum. So thanks, Richard. If you've been impacted by the work that this ministry is doing, I want to hear from you. Connect with us on social media and email comments@genesissciencenetwork.com. Now it's time to shift our focus to one of the toughest creatures on the earth, the tardigrade. On this week's Genesis Science Minute, we will explore how this tiny water bear thrives in the harshest of environments. So, in 1 minute, let's take a look right now. The tardigrade is a microanimal from a group of microscopic animals and organisms with animal-like qualities. It's also known as the water bear or moss piglet, and it can survive extreme conditions like radiation and boiling temperatures. They live deep within the ocean's water vents and high up in the Himalayas. Talk about resilience. While we can be duly impressed by this, even these tiny things are held together by God's Word, as the writer of Hebrews says. And just like the tardigrade, we can withstand life's challenges with God's unwavering Word as our support. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.
For more information, visit David Rives Ministries at davidrives.com. That's davidrives.com. David, RIVES.com.
Hey, the water bear. It does look a little bit like a very strange bear. Now it's time for this week's Ministry Report. There is something brand new here at the Wonder Center and Science Museum, and it is perfect for families, school groups, and anyone who loves to have a little fun. We have just opened our gemstone and fossil mining experience, a hands-on attraction where guests, they can pan for gemstones, for fool's gold, even fossils in a massive 65-foot mining sluice. It is part science, it's part history, and it's part treasure hunt, all put together. And it's already become one of the most exciting stops for visitors here at the museum. This new activity, it doesn't just provide fun, it gives kids and adults alike a tangible way to explore God's creation and take home a reminder of the incredible variety and the design that we actually see within the natural world, from every gem and every fossil to the complexity and diversity that we find. So come see it for yourself at the Wonder Center. And as always, thank you for supporting this ministry as we find new and creative ways to point people back to the Creator. We reached out to donors and raised funds to install this new exhibit in only a month, but we aren't stopping here. There are new exhibits in the work right now that we are actively moving forward on, and you can be a part of making those new exhibits happen. In fact, without the donations and prayers of our viewers, none of this would be possible. So your monthly support helps ensure that we can continue to share the wonders of God's creation with individuals all over the globe. I invite you right now to partner with us in ministry by making a tax-deductible donation. You can visit our website or call 931-212-7990 to donate and learn more about this important work. Next, we are going to look closely at rock layers and the story that they tell. On this week's Heavens Declare, we'll uncover why flat, featureless boundaries are a challenge to long-age geology. So let's take a look right now. You know, seeing these rock layers of strata reminds me of a story that you can read in college geology textbooks today. The conventional story of how these rock layers formed has each layer formed slowly over millions of years by the same geologic processes that we see operating today. Weathering and erosion then produced hills and valleys and the other topographical features that we see today. But all you have to do is look at a rock cut or any exposed strata, and you can see that there's a problem with this story. You see, if the old age view is indeed a correct interpretation of the evidence, we'd expect to see weathering and erosion between every rock layer. After all, if those rock layers are being deposited and exposed to the elements for hundreds of thousands or millions of years, well, you'd expect there to be evidence of rivers and streams and radical erosion in between every layer. But we don't find this evidence. You see, what we see instead is rapid or no erosion between the layers. For instance, between various sediment layers in the Grand Canyon, you've got clean and flat boundaries. There aren't gullies or hills or valleys that were slowly filled by the next layer of sediment. There's just a flat, featureless rock layer with another flat and featureless rock layer on top of that. In fact, the boundary between the Coconino Sandstone and the Hermit Formation in the Grand Canyon is completely flat and featureless from one side of the Grand Canyon all the way to the other. So how could this soft Coconino Sandstone manage to resist erosion through vast eons of time? Well, the logical answer is that it didn't. The long ages view of the rock layers simply fails to explain the evidence. But there is a model that does explain why we see very little erosion between the layers. You see, in the book of Genesis, we read about a violent global flood that destroyed the world that then was. The raging floodwaters would have ripped up miles of sediment, sand, and redeposited it in layers. Now, the layers would have been laid down minutes, hours, or at most days apart from one another. There was no time for slow and gradual erosion to wear down the layers. So the biblical historical accounts explain what we see in the world, but the man-made theories of geologic evolution do not. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. You know, again, what we see all over the earth when it comes to geology with flat, featureless boundaries, and sometimes supposedly millions or billions of years of missing time, always consistently points back to biblical history being correct. Now, scientists have found soft tissues in dinosaur fossils, structures that they say could even unlock clues about cancer, and that's kind of exciting. But what do these discoveries really reveal about the dinosaurs themselves and about Earth's history? Dr. Brian Thomas joins us to unpack the findings next on the Genesis Science Report. Hi, I'm David Rives, and I'm inviting you to visit the Creation Superstore, the largest Origins-related store in the world. Not only will you find every book and video title on creation versus evolution, science, but also every resource that teaches us about our origin and how it all takes us back to Genesis, a grand designer, the God of the Bible, and ultimately, yes, the gospel message. Documentaries your family can trust, fossils, teaching videos, children's books, church Bible studies, homeschool supplements, and expert scientific literature. If you can't find a title, call us up and we'll add it. Normally, you'd have to visit dozens of sites to gain access to all of the titles that are out there, and then you would be at a loss to whether the book or video was worth the purchase. But not here. We've curated the best of the best into top 10 lists. And on some of my favorite products, you'll find the Rives rating, where I help guide you on the best resources available for not only those who love history, biblical studies, and creation science, but also great products at the layman level, easy to understand for those who are learning or want their children and grandchildren to be exposed to a biblical worldview. Just look for the Rives rating to find my personal favorites. Use the search bar to look up a topic or follow our menu to sort by ministry, subject, or author. Give us a call at 931-212-7990 as you're browsing. We have ministry volunteers who will do their best to assist you at all hours of the day and even help you place your order. Yes, a real person. Get ready for a secure shopping experience brought to you by the leaders of creation-based research. Your purchase goes towards ministry outreach and also supports the authors and organizations who publish the material, most of whom are personal friends and colleagues of mine. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. Welcome back to the report. A new study is sparking headlines. Researchers have discovered soft tissues in dinosaur fossils and believe that they could hold clues to cancer research. Using advanced paleoproteomic techniques, scientists identified red blood cells, at least that's what it looks like, structures and potential biomarkers in fossils of dinosaurs, duck-billed dinosaurs from Romania, in fact. And they claim that this research could provide insights into how cancer develops and even how humans might fight it today. But what do these discoveries really tell us about dinosaurs, about disease, and about Earth's history? To help us dig deeper, we're joined by paleobiochemist Dr. Brian Thomas from the Institute for Creation Research, ICR. Brian, welcome to the program.
Greetings.
It is great to have you on to share about this. In fact, you've done a tremendous amount of research into original biomolecules in dinosaur bones, so we really appreciate your contributions. But this research focused on fossils that were found in Romania. Can you walk us through what scientists actually discovered and why they're calling it groundbreaking, even the key to cancer?
Well, I can tell you what I know from looking at what they've published, but I don't have a high hope that anything we discover in dinosaur remains is going to provide a key to cancer. That part of it seems low on data and high on hype from my perspective. But what did they publish? Actually, not much. They showed images using scanning electron microscopy of what looked like the shapes of red blood cells, and they call them possible red blood cell-like structures. So they didn't really do any of the molecular analyses that they talk about. So it's a lot of talk, but not a lot of data on this particular report.
And it's curious that even within the layman's scientific field, that obviously there's always hype within the titles of articles. Obviously they're trying to find a catch to get you to click on and read it or whatever it might be. But at the same time, paleoproteomic analysis is actually real, and it might be possible using liquid chromatography, mass spectrometry, or some of these other techniques that could actually tell us a whole lot more about dinosaurs, even though dinosaurs are supposed to have gone extinct millions and millions and millions of years ago. How does that play out?
Right, and so that's like a separate conclusion that we could draw as just intelligent observers, right? And we don't have to get sucked into hey, maybe we can solve cancer by looking at how dinosaurs dealt with it. We can draw completely different conclusions. One of which is even in the ancient world, and we would suggest that that this is a flood fossil. So in the pre-flood world, even there was cancer, and the creature in question, Telmatosaurus, not Tomatosaurus, Telmatosaurus, like you said, a duck-billed dinosaur from Romania. It has a kind of a tumor that's not malignant, and we see it in people and in animals today. It affects the jaw area, and so they found that tumor. They looked at the tissues inside the tumor, and they found basically the same thing you'd find today. Yeah. Hey, it's the same type of tumor, so what we might conclude is, even like today, we suffer, the effects of the fall into sin that happened in the garden with Adam and Eve, and because of that sin, dying you will die, said God in His promise in Genesis chapter 2. And so ever since then, we've suffered diseases and death. But a separate conclusion, and this may be, to me, the most impactful, is if it is red blood cells that they found, which would need further evidence to confirm, then what in the world are they doing in fossils that are supposedly, tens of millions of years old. We know that these biomaterials, these proteins, cannot last that long. But we have over 130 technical journal articles by mainstream scientists that we've collected and that show exactly that. Red blood cells, yes. Inside blood vessels, yes. Blood vessel material, which is made of essentially skin, the same type of tissue that makes up skin. And so these are actually in the fossils, and they make the fossils look young and fit this whole model that the flood formed the fossils thousands of years ago, and refuting the mainstream idea and the mainstream timeline.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. I guess it would be safe to say cells, osteocytes, proteins, things like collagen, all of these types of things are now being found not just within dinosaur bones, but even things that are supposedly hundreds of millions of years old, which begs the question, well, how could they have existed if they are hundreds of millions of years old and still exist within the preserved fossils? But even the idea of the cancer that we're finding in some of these fossils, how would that fit, and how would that show that death and disease and destruction happened after the fall, putting actually dinosaur fossils after the fall and not millions of years before mankind?
Well, that's a great point and a great question to ask ourselves. As Christians, if we believe what the Bible says, and if it's really God's word, then what does he say? He says there was no death before sin. And we see that, read it in the narrative in Genesis. We also see it in Romans chapter 5 explicitly. Death came from sin, came after sin. And so by placing these dinosaurs and all these rock layers and all the fossils that are in them, including the diseases that they had back then and show in their bones, by placing all that death and the disease in a timeline that's a biblical timeline, as you suggest, then we have what? We have the flood happening 1,656 years after creation. And I think the fall into sin happened right at that same year of creation. So 1,656 years after the fall, that's when these dinosaurs were dying and having these diseases. And that fits. It makes sense of the whole purpose of Jesus' first coming to earth was to defeat the ultimate enemy, which is death. He did that by rising from the dead. And then he, by virtue of his proven resurrection, gives us the evidence that bolsters the confidence that when he says he will come back, he actually will come back the second time. So we look forward to his return as well. But all these biblical principles and events, they really fit together like puzzle pieces. And I think that if we look at the fossils themselves, we see this news report that they're finding possible original biomaterials and whole cells maybe. That really fits the whole concept of dinosaurs having died in the flood after the fall.
The history of the Bible confirmed, affirmed again and again and again. Dr. Brian Thomas, thank you so much for being on the program to break this down for us.
Thank you, David.
Absolutely. And if you would like to learn more about dinosaurs and how they fit into Bible history, I would encourage you to check out Dr. Thomas's book, Dinosaurs and the Bible. It's a short read. It's an engaging look at the fossil evidence and what it reveals about God's creation and the flood. You can find it now at the Creation Superstore, creationsuperstore.com. While Brian's research highlights soft tissues and fossil preservation, well, there's another problem in the fossil record that scientists have wrestled with for decades, and it's called the Cambrian explosion. Now, a team from the Natural History Museum claims that they found evidence of complex animals supposedly living even before the Cambrian explosion, something that they believe could rewrite our understanding of life's history. But then we have to ask ourselves the question, does this discovery really answer the big questions, or does it simply push the mystery of evolution further back in time. Joining us to unpack this discovery is UK-based geoscientist and creation researcher Paul Garner. Paul is a fellow of the Geological Society of London and a researcher with the Biblical Creation Trust, specializing in paleobiology and the fossil record. He co-hosts the Let's Talk Creation podcast, and he's the author of The New Creationism and the Fossils and the Flood. Paul, thank you for being on the program.
My pleasure. Good to be with you, David.
It is excellent to have you on. Let's start with the basics here. What exactly is the Cambrian explosion that is being referenced in this news article?
Sure. The Cambrian explosion refers to the geologically abrupt appearance of animals in the fossil record near the base of the Cambrian rock system. So in conventional terms, in evolutionary terms, these are rocks which are about 540 million years old or thereabouts. Almost every phylum and class of animals makes its first appearance in those Cambrian rocks. A range of animals, some with hard parts, things like mollusks, brachiopods, echinoderms, arthropods, even chordates, which is the group to which vertebrates belong, but also lots of soft-bodied animals, things like comb jellies, sea anemones, lots of different types of worms. And this sudden appearance of so many disparate animal forms is so striking that geologists have referred to this as the Cambrian explosion. Yeah. And it's somewhat of a puzzle in the evolutionary perspective, because these organisms appear in a very narrow window of geological time without obvious precursors in older rocks. And so some scientists refer to this as biology's Big Bang.
Okay, so Paul, we see this explosion in the fossil record where all major body types suddenly appear. It sounds to me like they were all created, and then those are the first layers of flood deposition. But then you get this thing where, well, occasionally below those layers, we find things like potentially stromatolites or other microorganisms, things like that. But this research is saying, oh, complex animals are living millions of years, which again is something that is subjective to your interpretations, before the Cambrian explosion actually happened. It's looking at trace fossils, ichnofossils. Tell me why that's significant.
Yes, well, I mean, to come back to this point about fossils in rocks below the Cambrian, most of the pre-Cambrian rocks have yielded only single-celled fossils, things like bacteria and archaea, some colonial algae. But near the top of the pre-Cambrian, just below the Cambrian rocks, there are some assemblages of fossils that we refer to as the Ediacaran fauna, named after the Ediacara Hills in South Australia, where some of these fossils were described, but now known from many localities around the world. And there are some complex organisms in these rocks, soft-bodied organisms. They're somewhat strange, hard to interpret, but they don't really solve the problem of the Cambrian explosion, because these Ediacaran organisms are so unique that most of them are not thought to be directly ancestral to the Cambrian animals. Most of them seem to be unique lineages that didn't leave direct ancestors. But what we also have in those Ediacaran rocks, as you mentioned, are some trace fossils. So these are, we have different types of fossils. We have body fossils, which are the actual remains of organisms themselves, things like shell and bone. But we also have trace fossils, which are the remains of the activity of organisms when they were alive. So things like tracks, trails, and burrows. And trace fossils are important as we study that Cambrian Ediacaran sort of transition, because often they're more abundant, they're more common than the body fossils. So they can give us some insights into the anatomy and behavior of animals that were living at the time those sediments were being deposited.
You know, tell me why trace fossils might actually be clues as to the rapid deposition, why we potentially shouldn't see extremely well-preserved trace fossils if long ages of time are really the key.
Yeah. Well, obviously traces like trails, burrows, and so on, they're ephemeral structures, and they don't last for a long period of time. So they have to be buried rapidly in order to be preserved, like other ephemeral features. And so they testify, I think, to rapid deposition. One interesting thing about trace fossils is the general absence of trace fossils. There are far fewer trace fossils than you would expect to find in the rocks if they were deposited over a long period of time. The intensity of biotubation, the churning of sediments by the activity of organisms, is actually much lower than you would expect when you look at what's going on in modern oceans, where sediments routinely are completely homogenized by the activity of organisms because they have time to get to work. Yeah. Actually, in the fossil record, we do have trace fossils, but they're usually at a kind of intensity that suggests that sedimentation rates were rapid.
Okay. Interesting. So it seems to me like from an evolutionary point of view, these findings, they don't solve any mysteries. They actually create challenges to the standard idea of Darwinian evolution. But let's wrap up by, I just want to ask you, how should we as Christians interpret the Cambrian explosion, and what role did the flood play in these fossils that we find?
So obviously the researchers that we've been talking about are interpreting these rocks in terms of long ages from an evolutionary perspective. But actually creationists have a very different perspective on these rocks. In the creationist model, these uppermost Precambrian rocks and then the Cambrian rocks that contain these abundant animal fossils, they were the deposits of the first stages of the flood. So at the beginning of the flood, as the continental margins collapsed under enormous tectonic shocks, the flood waters, the ocean waters began to inundate the continents. And as they moved onto the continental shelves around the margins of the pre-flood continents, they encountered marine ecosystems where these Ediacaran and Cambrian animals were living, and they were buried successively. First the Ediacaran animals, then the Cambrian animals, and then other faunas after that.
Gotcha.
And so rather than seeing these fossils in terms of an evolutionary succession, we see them in terms of the successive burial during the flood, as the flood water sort of poured onto the continents from the ocean basins.
Yeah, it makes so much more sense from a biblical perspective. Paul Garner, thank you so much for being on the program, and I look forward to having you back in the future.
Thank you very much.
And for those who want to explore this topic further, check out Paul's book, Fossils and the Flood. It's a deep dive into Earth's lost worlds and shows how the evidence points back to the scriptural truth. That's it for today. I want to thank you for joining us on the Genesis Science Report. And until next week, keep looking up. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.